Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of HSP TV. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the wonderful Christi Cossette. And we will be talking about how to protect your energy as a trailblazer or a rebel. That's another word that we talked about. And it's so important because we operate outside what most people would call the norm. Most people would define as the traditional rules or the traditional roles. And that tends to take up a lot of energy. Wouldn't you agree?
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah.
So, how could people discover if they are a trailblazer or a rebel? That might be a good starting off point, because you first need to know if this talk is interesting for you and if you fall in
Right.
the category before you want to learn how to protect your energy. So, how
Yeah.
does that work for you? How did you discover it?
Well, for me, it was really easy to discover because I would say from a very young age, I was regularly told to sit down and shut up.
Mhm.
My family believed that women were best, seen and not heard, and that they had a specific role to play. And I immediately, from a young age, had a lot of strong opinions. I wanted to be at the table. I wanted to be involved in the conversations and the decision making. And, a lot of the men in my life didn't like that. So and what was interesting about it, a quick side note, is that it was like one of them was my dad, and he actually thought he was protecting me by telling me to sit down and shut up and holding me back because, the society at large might not accept you for who you are. And I want you to find a good husband someday. I want you to be a wife and a mother. And, you don't fit in the box. And therefore I'm uncomfortable and I want to protect you from that, somebody harming you in the future. So I want to be clear that sometimes people doing that can be out of love and maybe their own misinformation versus, people like truly trying to hold you back. They don't often think they are. But so I was always told to sit back, be quiet. And I found that I didn't fit in really anywhere in my school. I usually got really good grades. I was a top performer, and I lived in a very small town where that made people uncomfortable as well. And they tended to bring you down to their level if you looked better than they did, right? And so I found myself, in order to fit in, I had to like just shrink back and not be my true self and, just blend into the group. And I would say it wasn't until I think I was about a teenager. I saw my mom doing the same thing. And my dad traveled a lot or was gone a lot for his job. And so my mom really ran the house. She did everything from cooking and cleaning, but she also worked a job as well. But she also had to fix toilets and build shelves and do all the things that, would a traditional male role,
Yes.
because he was gone. And so I realized that she was also shrinking back in different scenarios, but she was actually running the show completely. I mean, she also paid the bills. She did everything for our home. And so she played the game very well to get what she needed out of different people, while also being the amazing woman that she was. So I decided then and there that I wasn't going to limit myself and that I was going to, number one, get out of the small town. I was going to become educated and I was going to go to achieve my dreams, because clearly everywhere I looked, people were trying to hold me back. And that it really just started me on a journey. So to fully answer the question of how do you identify, if you don't feel like you fit in, if you're told to sit down and shut up, if no matter where you go, somebody's saying this isn't right, you need to do something different. And ultimately, if you have like maybe confidence issues because you feel like nobody likes you and that you have to pretend to be something that you're not, that is a really strong indication that you are a trailblazer, you're the first, and that it's a really good thing. You have gifts that need to be shared with the world. You just haven't found your people yet.
Yes, I love that you're sharing that. So thank you for sharing your story. And of course, you're now sharing it very high level. There's a lot more underneath this story that we might touch upon in our conversation today. But although my story is different, it's also the same. So I wasn't told to shut down, and I wasn't told to be seen and not heard. But I was told that I was far too sensitive and that I really needed to grow a thicker skin, and that I shouldn't take everything so personal, and that I really needed to learn to let things go. And in hearing all of those things, combined with also being bullied at school and never fitting in anywhere, and also people looking at me funny when I shared my opinions or my beliefs, and not finding myself or recognizing myself in other people's beliefs or other people's opinions, the whole thing made me feel like there was something wrong with me, that maybe I was broken or something had to be going on, because I felt very different from everybody else, and I couldn't connect with other people, and nobody seemed to get me, including myself. I also didn't get myself. And for
Yeah.
a long time, that made me want to try and fit in, to change myself,
Mhm.
to become the person I thought my parents wanted me to be, my teachers wanted me to be, my friends wanted me to be, later my boss wanted me to be, my boyfriend wanted me to be. And
Yeah.
it's a whole lot of adjusting, constantly adjusting, and never really being me, the real
Mhm.
me, the me who I actually am, for a big part, because I didn't even know who that was.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
similar experiences that you didn't even really know who you were?
Um, I'd say it was a balance. It took me a while to figure it out. What I felt more of was people trying to change me. I wanted to be who I was, and everyone kept saying, "You're too much, but you're also not enough." Because I wasn't a good girl or a good woman, but
Mhm.
I was too much. I was too loud. You're too opinionated. You're too strong. You make me uncomfortable. You're too smart. Whatever it was, like there was always that comparison, and I never fit in. And even I had a number of boyfriends, like you mentioned, the boyfriend situation of I had the opposite, where I wasn't a people pleaser. I was almost like I took an attitude of screw you, and I really pushed back on people. So I fought it tooth and nail. And so I'd have boyfriends and we get in these huge fights, and they were like, you're just too much.
Yeah.
And so it was, yeah, I would say it for me, it went the opposite way, where I was always fighting it. And I felt like everything was so hard. Like, why doesn't anyone love me for who I am? Why is everybody trying to change me? Is anyone ever going to like me?
Mhm.
And to your point, I also thought there was something wrong with me, because why would I have to change who I am if so I thought that I was made wrong. Like, I actually used to say that I thought God made a mistake, and that I was supposed to have been born a man, because if I had been born a man, then everyone would have been totally comfortable with my opinions and drive to succeed, and wanting to start companies. I was supposed to, just get married and have babies and be comfortable in the kitchen. And although I have all that, and sometimes I do enjoy that. I'm talking about cooking right now. I obviously love my husband and my children very much, but I can do that, but it's not all of me. It's not the biggest part of me. I've always said that having children will be the most important thing I'll ever do, but I don't want it to be the only thing that I do. And
Mhm.
in my family and in my upbringing, that was what you do, period. And you didn't need anything more. And why would you ever want anything more? So yeah, a little bit different, but kind of the same, as you said.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about this, because, and I want to include you, viewers, watchers, listeners out there. Let me know with how, with whom you identify more, or what your personal story is, because this is a very interesting concept, because you were sure about who you were, and you were showing the world who you were, and you got judged for it, and felt
Yeah.
like there was something wrong with you, and that you might have been broken or built defective or something, and ending in the same type of feelings, while I wasn't sure who I was, because I never got the room to actually discover who I I am, let alone put into the world who I was, and tried to people please and get people to like me because I tried to play by their rules and be the person that they wanted me to be. But our end results are very similar. So again, if you're listening, if you're watching, let us know your thoughts. What was your situation? I'm dying to find out. But it's very interesting to hear that even though the underlying pattern might be slightly different, a lot of similarities are still in there, and we both qualify as being a misfit, a rebel, a trailblazer, a black sheep, and there are so many names.
Yes, so many names.
Yeah.
I think it's nonconformist.
Yes, exactly. And for a long time, I thought that it was something negative, right? That a black sheep was a negative thing.
Absolutely.
A misfit is still a word that I'm getting used to, because for me it had a very negative feeling, very negative energy, while other people say, oh, a black sheep or rebel has a very negative energy for me. So that is also an interesting thing, to see which of these words triggers you in a negative way and which words are either neutral or maybe you're seeing as positive. But what they all have in common is that you go against the grain, that you are not like everybody else, and that you have a very unique personality that for some reason was not allowed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So I still wonder all the time, like where it comes from, like the societal norms that we're supposed to fit in, you're supposed to fit into these boxes. And
Yes.
what I have actually found is that most of us are misfits or black sheep or different in many ways. We all have amazing gifts that I believe God has given us to share with the world. And it's really the cultural norms that we're told to sit down and shut up. And I'm so, it's disappointing. And so my message every time I want to talk to people is, and why I'm passionate about supporting women specifically, is because we're the ones that typically aren't given permission to step out. And it's almost like many of the people that I work with, they're asking for permission. They don't realize that they are, but they're looking for encouragement. They're looking for somebody to pave that way. Yeah. And so I used to think being a trailblazer was a bad thing. And I used to get frustrated, like, why am I the one that always has to do the hard work and then someone else just gets to walk on by? Yeah. And actually now I find it to be such an honor, because I hope and pray that I inspire other people to really step into their calling as well. Mm-hmm. And they just need more examples of others who have done what they want to do. And here's a tip for anybody who has ever felt jealous of somebody. That's usually a really big indicator of what you really want. And that, like, why does she have that and I don't? Yeah. It's actually a really good thing. And if you spin it, it's not jealousy. It's actually like, man, I really want that. I can do that too. And if you can be inspired by that person instead of jealous or envious, it can help you step into your future a lot faster.
I love that. I love that you're sharing that. And there are two things that I want to circle back to. The first was where you shared that it came from a place of love, what your dad was trying to do. I had a similar experience with my mother. When I discovered that I'm a highly sensitive person and that I'm an empath and all the other things that I discovered about myself, I went to my mother and I told her, I finally figured out what is wrong with me, because I still thought there was something wrong with me at that point. And I said, I'm a highly sensitive person. And her response was, yes, child, I know I am one too, but that's not something to be proud of. And then initially I was shocked and I thought, how can you say that? I didn't understand, but that came from her mother, my grandmother, who had lived the war, which was completely different for people in Europe than for people in the States or other places where it was a little bit further from a home. And they had seen firsthand what it meant to be different, what it meant to be an outsider, what it meant to be different from the grain, from the norm. And you were sent to a concentration camp and you were killed. So my grandmother genuinely believed that if she taught my mother to be just like everybody else, that my mother's life would be easier and that she would have less problems and that she would fit in better and have a more pleasant life. Well, the opposite sort of happened because my mother denies who she is even till today in favor of being like everybody else. And it's, as far as I can tell, not making her ecstatically happy. And but it came from a place of love. The teachings come from a place of love. So I recognize what you were saying there, and I also love that you are the spokeswoman for women. While I often attract the men, but then the sensitive men, the men who are not the alpha men, not the macho men, the men who are very in touch with their feminine side, who like to dress well, who do not want to talk about cars and beer and boobs and sex and all of those types of things, because they are also the misfit, but in a way also the trailblazer, because handing down from society, from generation to generation, has also been handed down the image of what a man is, just like the role of the woman, be seen, not be heard. It's also the man who needs to be the provider and needs to help everybody, needs to be strong, cannot show weakness. There are a lot of stereotype gender biases that have been handed down, and I often attract the men who do not fit into this society, who do not want to be talking about beer and cars and all of those things, or go to sports or watch soccer on TV with your pals with lots of beer, or whatever the norm is for the red hot blooded hetero male stereotype, right?
Yeah. Well, I should put you in touch with my son. So he's almost 12, and his entire life he has told me that he doesn't fit in because he's never liked cars. He's always been into art and drawing, and he when he was younger he liked to play with dolls, and he would act out like house situations, and like, this is the mommy, this is the daddy. And even as young as kindergarten, people were calling him gay, and they were saying things like, "Oh, you like pink, like that's not normal, like you must be gay." And like even the teacher was like, who's a man also, he was like, "I like pink. What are you talking about? That's such a, where did you even hear that?" And so for a long time, he would come home from school and say, "Mom, the girls don't like me because I'm a boy, and the boys don't like me because I like girl stuff." And I had to remind him, "Honey, you don't like girl stuff. You like," so yes, he likes to cook, and yes, he did play with dolls, but he also likes, chess, which is traditionally a male thing, and he likes board games. And so I had to remind him, like, you're actually a very well-rounded human. You have both, and you're very sensitive. And I was like, you're going to make an amazing husband and a dad someday, because you can really, get on our level and empathize with us, and but you still want to be a leader in your home and set a good example and love and cherish your family." So I've had to remind him that, of his identity over and over again, that he is like, "Yeah, you have a ton of value, and don't even worry about it." I was like, "You just haven't found your people yet, babe. Like, you're gonna find other friends, and they're gonna love you for who you are. And let's, in the meantime, I do." And of course we try to get him in. He loves to dance too, so we're putting him in hip hop dance and break dancing classes to try and meet other kids his age who have similar interests. And we support him through chess and other things and cooking classes. So but yeah, that's so funny that you say that, because I deal with that every day.
I get it. And it's also bias, right? That's been handed down because traditionally we see the male as more analytical, more left-brained, action-taking, goal-oriented, money-making, and the female is more the creative, the intuitive, and all of the things that you're mentioning tie into being a very creative person. Cooking is a form of creativity, dancing is a form of creativity, identity, of expressing yourself.
Right.
And it's those stereotype images that we have that are, I think, also confusing kids about their own identity, who they are, but definitely owning it. And I was a girl that loved building tree houses, and I would climb higher than any boy in my class. And
Yeah.
I had a Swiss Army knife with me, and I knew how to build things. Still, now I have many more tools in my shed than most of my male neighbors, and I know how to use every single one of them. They come to me to ask for advice for remodeling and such, which is also not gender stereotype. So
Right. Right.
recognize it, but then from the female perspective. Very interesting.
Yeah. Like you, I used to be called a tomboy is what they called it when
Yes,
I was growing up.
tomboy.
And yeah, and I also like love to climb trees, and I grew up on a farm and I was always outside. And yeah, I just did not fit in with what people expected of me. But one thing I'll add is what I found, I would say what I struggled with the most was, so for example, we were on a farm. So my brothers were supposed to go out, and their jobs were things like take out the trash, go out and feed the cows, milk the cows, etc.
Yeah.
And they didn't have to do anything inside. So no cooking, no cleaning. I was the designated dishwasher of the family,
Yeah.
hand washing the dishes because we didn't have an actual dishwasher at the time. But I was miffed because I also was required to go out and work in the barn because they needed extra hands and I was available.
Mhm.
And so they wanted they wanted both. If you're available, I want you to help me, but I'm not going to help you. And they certainly never offered help my mom in the kitchen or in the house or anything like that. We had to figure it out on our own. But hey, I need help. You need to come help me. So that's where I really struggled, is I didn't feel like it was fair. Like I grew up a long time thinking this is so unfair.
Yeah.
And now it still isn't, I guess, but it's not so much about fairness for me anymore. It's about loving people for who they are, not who you might want them to be, or not to based on a certain stereotype.
Yeah.
And so I've just made it my mission to love people where they're at, to help speak them into their calling and help rise them up to whatever they're looking for in their next phase of life, and really just help them accomplish everything that they wanted to do, be all they can be, and live their best life. I mean, it sounds so generic maybe, but I really believe that you can build a life that you love.
Yes.
But it really starts with accepting yourself for who you are, finding your people, and then giving yourself permission to do things that you actually enjoy doing. And then if you feel led to go in one direction, to actually take a step out and try it and see where it leads. And then, I believe God just keeps leading you to the next step, right?
Yes. I love that you're saying that, because my signature book and my signature program are called The Roadmap to Living the Life You Love.
Oh, perfect.
I completely recognize it. And I also recognize what you're saying, not from personal experience, but this was my mother's experience, what you are describing, because she was one girl with three brothers, and she and her mother were always doing the housework, the female oriented tasks, except for when they needed extra hands. Then she could go and help the boys. But the men, my grandfather, her father, her brothers, never pitched in when it came to cleaning or washing or vacuuming or any of those types of things. So I think that frustration spilled into, I only have a brother, so we are two people. My mother splitting things fairly between us.
Yeah. And what you just said made me think of another story. I actually went home. I was an adult by this time. I was married. I had multiple children, and my hometown is like 3 hours from where I live. So maybe like once a quarter, we drive home and we see my extended family, or my dad and others. Sometimes they're really large family gatherings, sometimes they're smaller. But we went home and we were at my aunt's house, and I hadn't seen my dad or my brothers in months. And I sat down at the table, and they were all sitting around eating, and I sat next to them when we were sitting talking. And my aunt and my grandma started to get up and do the dishes. And, a couple people offered that weren't like the specific like so like, for example, my uncle's girlfriend offered to help, and my aunt turned her down. No, you can't help. And then somebody else went up and offered help. Nope, I'm good. And then by the end of the meal, she pulled me and my sister and one of my other cousins aside and like chewed us out and was like, how dare you just sit there and while we clean up after everybody else? Like, you should have come and helped me. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? I just saw you turn down help from 3 other people. I don't want them to help. You're supposed to help because you're the next oldest female. Like, this is your job. And I was like, well, I really wish you would have communicated that expectation before you just did it yourself and got angry. But I just wanted to see my dad and my brothers. I haven't seen them in months. And I figured since I'm in town, I should probably do that. Should probably talk to them.
Yeah.
But I was just so disappointed when I left because like, so not only was there an expectation that like a certain female would come forward and do the work, but that the men could sit down and chat, but the women couldn't. So I was like, come on. We're not living in the Stone Age anymore, people. Come on.
No, I actually wrote an entire article about that subject, the expectations and disappointments and hopes and how they all tie together, because that is also a big theme in most of our lives, because people have certain expectations of us and we are not those people. So we tend to disappoint them by being who we are. Even in my case, when I was trying to fit in and trying to please, I was still disappointing because I never got it the way I was supposed to, or never did it the way I was supposed to. So there's a lot going on there with expectations and disappointment and family drama, as you will, in that instance. So that also plays a role in your energy management, right?
Yes. Oh gosh, my energy management. So what I'll say is it had to start young. I had to encourage myself more than you could believe. I had to remind myself all the time that this isn't where I belong, and it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And then I worked through it by setting a goal and planning out a plan of action to get out of my hometown, be educated, and then, start a job, and then eventually start a company, start a family, all of that. And so I had to psych myself up a lot. I read a lot of self-help books. I would find podcasts to listen to. And then managing my energy. I had to do things like find other misfits. I made friends with other people who didn't fit in. And, I just had to find my people. And so when I was in college, thankfully, I did finally find my people. I made a lot of really good friends. I met my husband, and I'll say my husband actually healed my soul. And that sounds really dramatic, but he was truly the first person in my entire life who actually loved me for who I really was. Everyone else prior to him had been trying to change me, and even friends like who really liked me, they'd say, oh yeah, that's just Christi. Christi, she's so much, she's in your face, she's got all her opinions. And he just really loved that about me. And even to this day, if you ask him, like, what do you love about Christi? He would say her passion. Like, she's just got this fiery personality. She loves people, and she loves people so much that she's so passionate. And that means that sometimes I get in people's faces and sometimes I get really riled up about things, and that can make some people uncomfortable. And he's just like, go girl. That means you care. So find your people for sure. But also, I found it through God. I'm a Christian, and I do a lot of Bible reading. I do a lot of journaling. I do find that planning and tracking my goals helps me a lot because it reminds me that I'm working towards something and that I'm building a better life. And then over time, I was able to do it by helping other people as well. Now, it took me a while to get there, but it took me a while to admit that I had something to offer other people as well. But once it happened in the work environment, actually, in the corporate world, I had several younger women who would say things to me like, wow, you inspire me. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm just showing up doing my job. What are you talking about? And they were like, yeah, but it was the way that you handled that situation. Like, so-and-so got really upset about this, and you just handled it, and you held your ground, and you were very confident. And how did you do that? And so I started mentoring other women, and I started leading groups, and they used to have these, different activities like, oh, women's groups, or we would get together and they talk about things like, how do you ask for a raise? And the women would talk about things like, oh, I just feel so bad about asking for more money. I mean, is that really selfish? And did I really earn that money? I finally just like interrupted and I was like, hey, ladies, I just want to be really clear. There's not a single man in the world who sits in a room like this and says, oh, I'm afraid to ask for more money. I'm really worried they're going to think that I'm a bad person and that they're going to judge me. I'm like, that is not even in their vocabulary. They don't even think like that. I'm like, it's literally like, hey, I have a family to support. I think I'm worth more money. I need a raise. And, this is the value that I'm adding. I'm like, so how about we just switch the conversation to the value we're adding and stop talking about if we're worth it?
Yes, I love that you're sharing it and all of that, because I recognize what you're saying about your husband and healing your soul. I was lucky enough to meet a man that did the same for me. I was not lucky enough to have called him my husband, but he did the same for me. And it's so important that you meet the people who do not want to change you, who see you for who you are, but also at the same time you feel comfortable enough sharing your naked self with, being 100% yourself, which is what my podcast is about. And it's that acceptance. It's indeed finding your people. It's finding your tribe, which is a big reason of the why behind my solutions community, where we connect with people like us, because we need to meet those people that accept us without question, without wanting to change, where we don't have to apologize for who we are, where we don't have to pretend to be somebody else, where we don't have to rein ourselves in order to not be too much. And that's a beautiful thing when you're able to find that, because we need that.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that, so for me, I have found that I found it when I found other women who are also confident in who they were, because what usually ended up happening is when people were upset with me is they were projecting something about themselves that they didn't like onto me. Like, hey, we're going out this evening. I really want to I want to go dancing. And then I'm an introvert. And I was like, I don't want to go dancing. And then they would be disappointed at me because well, now I can't go and now I'm not going to have any fun and you're ruining my fun. Well, if I go, then I'm not going to be true to who I am. And then,
You're ruining my fun.
so it creates this awkward dynamic. So I started finding friends who liked the same types of things that I did and needed, maybe more introverts who needed that downtime. And then we could just be like, hey, I'm going to get my separate room. I don't want to bunk with you. I love you and all, but I need some downtime. And they'd be like, oh, I totally get it. No problem. And then we would just meet up and go for a walk or go for lunch or something like that later. And so you just have to really know, like, what do you need? And this goes back to, you said, how do you refresh yourself? How do you do that through being a trailblazer? Is you have to know what you need. And it takes a while to figure that out, because you just assume that you should be, okay and comfortable with what other people want. But I wasn't. I really wasn't. Like I had times where I would go out with friends and they wanted to stay out till 2 a.m. and I was exhausted. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like, I'm not fun. It's what I used to tell myself. Yeah. And then I was like, no, I'm actually really fun, just not at 2 a.m. because I need to be in bed by 9 or 10 or I'm a zombie. So you have to know those things about your natural rhythms. And especially as we get older, you just need to focus on your body and your health, or you can't be what you need to be for other people. So
exactly traditional things like getting to know your user manual. You need to know the ins and outs of what makes you you. You need to know what gives you energy, what drains your energy, what you can do, what you cannot do, but also what your talents and what your gifts are, and what you should really outsource to other people when you're running a business. All of this information is extremely important, because we tie it back into energy, because that was our theme also, how to protect your energy as a trailblazer. It is by knowing these things about yourself. If you are an introvert, meaning that you get your energy by being alone, by recharging by yourself, then you should plenty of time for you to be alone and to recharge your battery in order to keep the natural healthy balance that you have. If you are more of an extroverted person, then you recharge and you get energy from being around large groups of people. And so that means that you probably need less downtime, but you need to feed that part of yourself by regularly being among other people. If you are only by yourself, you will also die and drain your energy. And then you have the special blend of people, of which I am one, who slide on that scale. I have moments
Oh,
where I need to go dancing. This weekend I was dancing and I had so much fun. And I could also go to house parties and just really dance my emotions and everything out. It was for me like that exhaust valve that let everything out from the inside. But I can also have moments where I think I cannot people today. I can barely human.
sure.
I know I don't need anybody. I don't want, and please don't talk to me, where I need
Yeah.
to retreat and go into nature. So again, if you're watching, if you're viewing, if you're listening, let us know with what you identify. Are you more on the introvert side? Are you more on the extroverted side? Or are you like me, sliding in between depending on your mood, the time of the month, your energy, the moon?
Oh,
All of these things. And that's the things that you need to learn about yourself, because that is how you protect your energy, by knowing exactly who you are, what your limits are, what your boundaries are, and then also guarding and protecting them. But I see so many people that come to me that, in the example that you gave, when you go out and you go dancing until 2, or they ask, do you want to go and drink something in a bar, where they feel like, yeah, but if I say what I really think, or if I say no, then I'm either, oh, Nelly Downer, or is she always the nagging, or you are
yeah.
always the party pooper, or you don't say anything and you go, and then you need days and days and days of recuperation after. So many
Yeah.
are keeping their mouths shut because they're afraid of what other people will think, of what other people will say, and most of all, they are afraid that they will never get invited again and that they end up always being alone.
Yeah, that is so true. And I don't have any answer to this other than to say you just have to learn to get over it. Because when you find your people, they're going to love you. And usually if you go to do what you need to do, you'll find other people in those scenarios. Like you might run in as you're walking to your room, you might find someone in the hallway. And I'm the kind of person where yes, I need to be alone, but I also feel really refreshed when I meet with somebody one-on-one.
Mm.
Like this type of conversation, like over coffee with a girlfriend, will absolutely light me up and refill me for days. But if I went into a whole big group, I would probably be exhausted, right? So you have to understand those nuances as well, and just give yourself permission to have what you need. And I would say the second step is you have to communicate it. So, for example, my husband is an extrovert and I'm an introvert. It's very common, opposites
Mm.
attract, right? And so he thought I was weird. I mean, although he loved me, he was just like, well, come on, let's go out, let's go do something. And I'm like, I cannot. And early on in our marriage, we would get into these big arguments. And then finally, I just had to be like, hey, when you push me like this, it crosses a boundary and it makes me feel really uncomfortable, like that you're not accepting me for who I am. Like I know that you like that. And we have to find a balance where I give you what you need, but you also need to give me what I need. And I can't constantly be giving to you and not filling up what I need, or I'm going to turn into a crazy person, and that's not good for anybody.
You're
And it
not
took a
like that
while.
either, yes.
Yeah, it took a while to figure each other out, but now obviously we're in a very good rhythm. We've been together for 20 years, so
Yes. That is wonderful. And that's also, I think, what a lot of people would love to hear, because I know there are plenty of people out there that are thinking, am I ever going to find the right person for me? Is it even possible to find someone who accepts me totally for who I am? So thank you for being an inspiration for people who are feeling like that, because we need to hear more stories of success. And indeed, what you were saying is also true. You need to communicate. So what I often advise people is to turn it around. If if you were the one that was asking your best friend to go and drink something with you, or to go out with the girls and go dancing, what would you rather have? That she honestly answered you and say, you know, I love the invite, please invite me again next time, but for today I'm at the end of what I can do, my battery is dead, so I'm sitting this one out? Or would you want her to say, okay, because she is afraid that I won't ask her again next time if she's actually being honest with me? And a lot of
Yeah.
people find that to be very confrontational. And of course, most people say, no, of course I want you to be honest, and it's perfectly fine if you're being honest. So the key, I think, is also indeed about trust. If you are friends with the right people, then they want you to be honest with them. They want you to say, well, I love the invite, but not today. Today I need to go to bed early, but next time for sure, ask me again. And that is okay to say, and not only okay, but desirable, to be
Yeah.
honest and to say these things. And if you are friends with the wrong people, then yes, they will not accept this. They might make fun of you, they might say mean, nasty things, but then you immediately know these are not my real friends, which is also a good thing
Absolutely.
to know.
Yeah, and if you find that you're around someone and they drain you, or you find that you need a day or two to recover after spending time with them, or you're about to spend time with them and you're like actually dreading it, that's a really good sign that they're not the kind that they're not your people. And they might still be a perfectly good person, they're just not for you. And I would recommend, separating yourself from them, or just spending less time with them. Or if you do spend time, put boundaries on it. Like, oh, I can meet you from 12 to 1 for lunch, but I got this meeting afterwards. So it's a limited amount of time that you can spend with them. And over time, those relationships tend to fade anyway.
Yes, I love that you're saying that. I call those people energy vampires. And you
Yes.
prepare
Yes.
yourself for them. Indeed, set clear boundaries, make it an appointment from an hour. And then there are also certain things that you can do to prepare yourself beforehand. And you can make sure that you're really grounded. You can make sure that you're breathing from your belly. There are also various protection techniques that I teach people like us, so that you can protect your energy better, so that you are either reflecting their energy back instead of, soaking it up like the open sponge that we naturally are, or where
Yeah.
you just are able to let it go right after, so that you can do proper energy management for yourself, which especially for these types of energy vampiring people is very important.
Yeah. Well, I know earlier you had mentioned being an empath as well. And I'll tell you what, there's so many times where I walk in a room and I'll suddenly feel anxious or angry. And then I'll literally have to, it took time to figure this out, but I'll literally be like, wait, I was fine. I was fine before I walked in here. This isn't me.
Yes.
So I actually worked at a job for months where I was like, something changed since I started at this company. Like, I have all this anxiety. Like, what is wrong with me? And then I dawned on me that my boss was always emanating anxiety, and that I was just taking it on as my own. And
Yes.
so I really did have to start praying and doing cleansing prayers and being like, bring peace into the office before I would encounter her, so that I could okay, here we go. It's good, whatever. So sometimes you just have to recognize that it's not you.
That's a very important aspect, and that's also something that I had to learn, and it's something that I teach to people that I guide. It's when I was younger, I normally am just happy and cheerful, and that's who I am. But I could be inconsolably sad in the blink of an eye, and my mother would then ask me, "Well, what's wrong? Did you hurt yourself? Did somebody call you a name? Did you fall? Did you break something? What's going on that you're so sad all of the time?" And I never could answer that question because I had no idea. So that just came out crying, "I don't know," you kind of thing. And that was
Yeah.
because I had the misguided notion that everything that I'm feeling is mine because I'm feeling it. So I thought it must be mine. I'm feeling it. And it wasn't
Yeah.
until I discovered about high sensitivity and being an empath that I discovered that we are experts at taking over other people's energies and emotions as if they are our own. And when you don't know how to distinguish between something that's actually yours and something that you've taken over, then that can drive you almost crazy because you cannot find the answer to what's wrong. So you can also not fix it.
Yeah. Well, and just being honest, I still struggle with this one because it takes me a while to figure out that it's not mine, because I do genuinely feel angry or I genuinely feel anxious. And
Mhm,
so then I'll have to, I'll go home and I'll be laying in bed thinking like, what happened today? Like,
mhm.
why was I so angry or irritable or whatever? And then I'm just like, I was around that person around 2 o'clock and I think they slimed me and I carried it with me the rest of the day as if it was
Yes.
mine. So I tend to have to figure it out after the fact. And then when I go back to be around those people or those environments, I can identify it right away.
Mhm.
But the first time I encounter it, I'm almost always, blindsided by it.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. I had periods like that as well. That's part of why I dove into protection techniques where I protect myself beforehand to sort of avoid that. But that's also not always possible. Also, that time of the month, your mood, the weather, the moon, all of these things, the
Yeah.
planetary alignments, things in retrograde, everything plays a role in it. Everything's connected. And so that's why I created special pendants that have gemstones with essential oils and then metals so that they become an organite, so that you can sort of put a local force field around your neck that helps
Yeah.
protect you, which is so life changing because then even when I am not very strong myself, I still have a strong force field. I'm
Yeah.
helping myself by wearing these protection mechanisms, which are amazing.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
I might have to take a look at that. I don't have any of those yet. Um,
I can totally recommend them. So everything is indeed about knowing who you are, but also knowing what you're vulnerable for, and
yeah.
knowing yourself really well. Because the better you know yourself, the easier it becomes to distinguish between is it mine or is it somebody else's. And if you cannot find an immediate reason for why it should be yours, then the chances are much higher that it's somebody else's. Because in general, when it is yours, you know. And you might not know what to call it, but you definitely know that you are the source of origin from this feeling. So whenever you're in doubt and whenever you're not sure, then it's probably somebody else. But then still, you need to learn how to handle things like that, how to either prevent it from happening, recognizing it sooner, but then also knowing how can I let it go? I get rid of this energy, of these emotions, because they are not helping me in my
Yeah.
day-to-day life.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So you obviously know way more about this than I do. What I can say is what I have done is I pray for protection over myself. And then when I feel like there's something in the room that specifically, if it's not of God, I'll just, ask that God would remove it in Jesus' name. And it helps, just create
Beautiful.
that peace.
Hmm.
One other thing I wanted to talk to you about though, Barbara, is you mentioned a couple times your time of the month. And I'll tell you when it's so I'm in my 40s now, and I didn't start learning about this until I was in my 40s. No one ever talked about anything about a woman having a cycle, and it was just always like that time of the month, or you're on the reg, or something negative or derogatory about having your period.
Yeah.
And what I've actually learned since I've hit with perimenopause, and I'm now seeing a doctor for hormones being out of balance, your women have a monthly cycle where depending on the week of the month, your appetite changes, your needs for vitamins and minerals changes, your need for rest changes. Even like whether you want to be social, whether you want to have sex, whether you want to be in your room, like
Or what
just
you can eat also.
right.
Yeah.
Right. It all depends on the time of the month that you're in. And
Yes.
it can truly change daily, where men tend to be on a 24-hour cycle. So these poor guys are like, these girls are crazy
Yeah.
because it can change at the drop of a hat, and certainly on a daily basis. And they just go
Two
through their
days
normal
ago, you were
24-hour
fine
cycle.
with the exact same thing, and now you're this.
Right, right. And so I just want to give encouragement to all the women out there too, that if you feel crazy, you're not crazy. You probably just are you just need to learn more about your cycle and where you are, and you're not getting something that you need, and you need to figure out what that is.
Yes.
But I also give myself permission, like, oh, that's the week that I'm not going to want to be around people. So I'm definitely not scheduling interviews, or I'm
Yeah.
not scheduling big meetings that week. But then, oh, that's the weekend that I'm going to be really really in people's faces. I'm going to be super social. So that's the time I'm going to schedule that difficult conversation, or I'm going to, hang out with girlfriends or whatever it is. So
Yeah, very important.
it really does matter. It really does.
Also the other way around, right? When I feel that I'm more emotional, or when I'm feeling unlike my normal usual self, then the first things I check is it, where am I in my cycle? Where is it in the lunar cycle? Because that also ties into womanhood.
Yeah.
The lunar cycle is very important for us, and our menstruation, our time of the month, tends to sync up with the lunar
Yeah.
cycle. So that is also very important. And then I check the planetary alignments and their influences, because as women, we are more sensitive to that than most
Absolutely.
women. And so these are very, because for me, that gives a sense of inner peace. If I think, it's almost that time of the month. Oh, that completely explains why I'm feeling this way. And then I can let it go. I don't have to worry about it, and I can place it, and then it's okay.
Yeah, I actually, once I learned this about myself, what I found was, so week 3 of your cycle, women tend to reassess their whole life, and they're questioning their relationships and their job, and you're just really assessing everything. And so I found that I was getting into fights with my husband more often. And I'm like, gosh, and I was convinced that he was the problem and that it was a really big deal. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, we were fine. Like, where is this coming from? And so I happened to listen to a different podcast, and they were talking about week 3. And I was like, huh, it is week 3. I'm just going to note that away. And I'm just going to stop yelling at my husband for now. And I'm just going to see what happens next month. And sure enough, like week 3, I was like, and I was like, oh, maybe it is me.
Interesting.
And it really did. Like every month I was like, oh, okay. So it got to the point where I was like, if I'm really, like ragging on you one day, just ask me, is it week 3? And he's like, I am not asking you if it's week 3.
Hey, you will bite my head off. That's not safe topic. I cannot ask
Right?
that.
But it was helpful to know that there was a reason for it, and that it wasn't like our marriage wasn't in a big problem. And it was really just, I'm going to just ask on week 4 and see if I'm still upset about this. And I never was.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this, because I think a lot of women needed to hear this, but I also have a lot of males who listen and watch my episodes. And I think that for them, it's also very important to learn a bit more about these female things and these things that are happening with the females in your life, so that you can also think, oh, well, maybe it's something that has absolutely nothing to do with me. So I'll just, try to steer clear. And then next week I'll check in and see how it's going then.
God bless them.
Exactly. So I've been loving this conversation, and I think we hit upon some really, really great points. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for being a guest on the show. You viewer, listener out there, I would love it if you would share your biggest insight out of our talk today, preferably underneath the video. And if you are so inclined, it would be even more amazing if you could hit the subscribe button, maybe like this episode. And if you think more people need to learn about what we talked about today, then I would be honored if you would share this episode with your tribe. But I can also imagine that you might want to know, I need to talk to Christi, or I need to get Christi in touch with my wife's girlfriend or something. So where can people find you, Christi?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on my website. It's at ChristiCossette.com, and I feel like I need to spell it. So it's Christi, it's Christ with an I, Christi. A lot of people spell Christi with an IE, and it's not. So it's ChristiCossette.com. And there's a link there that you can schedule a kind of an intro consult with me. You can schedule anything from a 60 or 90-minute meeting to meet with me and learn more about how I can help. I also have a book that came out late last year called Jumpstart Your Blank, Volume 6, where I talk about empowering yourself. And, I can be found on all, Facebook, Instagram, all under Christi Cossette, and LinkedIn.
I love it. Don't worry about if you didn't catch it or if her spelling wasn't clear enough. I think it was, but all of the links that she's mentioning will be included in the show notes below this video. So you can find them there. No worries. All my information on how to contact me will also be there. So for today, I thank you for watching, for listening. And I thank you, Christi, for being here and sharing your wonderful information and your knowledge, because we need to talk about these topics. So I feel honored that you wanted to be my guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so good to talk to you.
Bye, everybody. See you next week for
Bye.
another interview.